when a black sedan rolled slowly into the parking lot. An elderly woman stepped out, peered through the window, and suddenly stopped as if something had shocked her. Moments later, she walked inside, looked directly at me, and asked, "Why aren't you living in your house on Cedar Ridge Drive?" I blinked at her. "What house?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply made a phone call. 3 days later, I walked into my parents' anniversary party, and my mother's face drained of color the moment she saw me. My name is Belinda Cooper. I'm 29 years old, a second-grade teacher, and a single mom. This is the story of how my own parents quietly stole a house that was meant for me, and spent 2 years collecting rent from it, while my daughter and I slept on a shelter cot. But only if you genuinely want to. Now, let me take you back to last January, the week everything in my life began to fall apart. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. I remember the day clearly because Tuesdays were Maya's library days. She would always come home from school with her backpack stuffed full of picture books she couldn't wait to show me. That afternoon, she was spreading them across the kitchen table of our small one-bedroom apartment on Aurora Avenue, excitedly flipping through the pages, while I stood at the counter holding a notice that made my stomach drop. 30 days to vacate. The building had been sold. New owners. All tenants out by February 15th. I read the notice once, then again, and then a third time, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something less final. They didn't. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into the clear plastic folder where I kept our important documents. Then I sat beside Maya. "Which book first tonight?" I asked. She held up a story about a bear building a house in the woods. Of course she did. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a grocery receipt and a pen and started doing the math. First month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit, at least $4,200 for anything in Seattle that wouldn't move us too far away from Maya's school. My savings? $1,100. The last child support check from Marcus had bounced in October. The one before that never arrived. I picked up my phone and called my mother. "Mom, I need help," I said. "Just for a few weeks, until I find another place. Maya and I can share a room." Hazel Cooper paused, the way she always did right before saying no. A long pause that almost made you believe a yes might be coming. "Honey," she said gently, "we really don't have the space. Derek and Natalie are staying with us right now. You know how things are." Derek, my older brother, 33 years old, working full-time in logistics. His wife, Natalie, sold real estate. And yet somehow they were living comfortably in my parents' 4-bedroom house. "Could Maya at least stay with you while I figure things out?" I asked. That wouldn't be fair to Derek's kids. I didn't argue. I never did. "Okay, Mom," I said quietly, the same way I had said it my entire life. Then I hung up. 3 days later, Maya and I checked into Hope Harbor Family Shelter on Lake City Way with 2 suitcases and her stuffed bear named Captain. The intake worker handed me a sheet of rules and our room number. The hallway smelled like industrial bleach mixed with someone's leftover spaghetti. A fluorescent light above our door buzzed constantly, a high electric hum I would hear in my sleep for the next 2 months. Maya looked up at me. "Is this a hotel, Mom?" "It's temporary, baby." I had to believe that. The room held metal bunk beds with thin, vinyl-covered mattresses. Maya climbed onto the top bunk immediately and smiled. "It's like a treehouse." I lay on the lower bunk, staring at the wooden slats above me while she shifted as she tried to get comfortable. "Mommy, the light makes a noise." She meant the fluorescent tube in the hallway. Its steady buzz leaked through the gap under our door. "Close your eyes," I told her softly. "I'll tell you a story." I invented one about a girl who could talk to foxes. I don't remember how the story went. I only remember that by the time I ran out of words, Maya's breathing had slowed into sleep. The hallway was quiet, except for the buzzing light and the faint sound of a woman crying somewhere down the corridor. I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring into the darkness, thinking something I couldn't say out loud. Maya is going to remember this. Not the fox story. This. The bunk bed. The humming light. The smell. One day she'll understand what a family shelter is, and she'll know her mother couldn't give her a home. The thought pressed against my chest like a stone. At 8:15 the next morning, someone knocked on the door. A woman with warm brown eyes stood there, wearing a lanyard that read, Alicia Bennett, Case Manager. "Belinda Cooper?" she asked kindly. "I've been assigned to your case. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" Alicia was professional but compassionate. She walked me through housing wait lists, emergency assistance programs, and Section 8 timelines. She didn't sugarcoat anything. When I finally asked, "How long do most families stay here?" she hesitated for just a moment. "It varies," she said. "But I'll help you get out as quickly as possible." That night, I texted my mother a photo of one of Maya's drawings from school. A rainbow stretched over a small house. 3 hours later, at 9:47 p.m., Hazel replied, "Stop being dramatic. Lots of people go through hard times." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I took a screenshot and saved it to a new folder on my phone labeled Records. I didn't know exactly why yet. I only knew I should keep it. Our days settled into a routine. 5:30 a.m., my alarm vibrated quietly so I wouldn't wake the family next door. I showered in the communal bathroom under lukewarm water, wearing the cheap flip-flops I bought from a dollar store because the tile floor always looked slightly sticky. After showering, I dressed Maya, braided her hair with a small comb I kept in my purse, because I learned quickly that anything left in that bathroom vanished within hours. By 7:15 a.m., I dropped her at the before-school program. Then I drove 12 minutes to Green Lake Elementary School, a Title I school where I taught second grade. Some of my students came to class hungry, so I kept a drawer filled with granola bars at my desk. I taught all day, picked Maya up at 4 o'clock, and by 5 o'clock, we were back at Hope Harbor Family Shelter. Every evening, Maya drew. She drew constantly. The shelter had a donated box of crayons. Half were broken, most of them dull shades of brown. Maya used every one of them. She drew flowers, dogs, rainbows, but mostly, she drew houses. Houses with big windows, houses with yards, houses with trees and stone paths leading to the front door. Sometimes she even drew smoke curling from chimneys, even though it was January in Seattle and our last apartment hadn't had a fireplace. Every time I watched her draw those houses, something inside my chest cracked a little more. One night, after she fell asleep, I sat on the lower bunk with a notepad and did the math again. Deposit plus first and last month, $4,200. My savings, $1,100. The gap? $3,100 I didn't have. I texted my brother Derek. "Can you help me with the deposit? I'll pay you back within 6 months." The reply came the next morning. "Sorry, sis, we're tight right now. Mom says you should apply for Section 8. I stared at the message for a moment, then opened Instagram. Derek's newest post filled the screen. A photo of a brand new Toyota Sequoia, silver paint shining under the sun. Caption, upgraded. Hashtag, blessed. I didn't answer his text. Instead, I took a screenshot of the post, added it to the records folder on my phone, and went to read Maya her bedtime story. 3 weeks after we moved into the shelter, Hazel Cooper came to visit. She arrived carrying a plastic bag stuffed with Derek's kids' old clothes, shirts with stained collars, jeans worn thin at the knees, and a bright smile meant for the front desk staff. "I'm Maya's grandmother," she told the intake coordinator as she signed the visitor log with her neat, looping handwriting. "I just wanted to bring a few things for my granddaughter." She found us in the common room. Maya was sitting at a table drawing again. Hazel swept in with open arms and a cheerful voice. "There's my girl! Grandma's here!" Maya hugged her happily. From the doorway, the intake coordinator smiled warmly. I watched Hazel carefully. The warmth in her voice felt practiced, like something she had rehearsed in the car before walking inside. Once the coordinator left, the smile faded. "Belinda, we need to talk." She sat across from me, placing her handbag neatly in her lap, her voice dropping into the serious tone she used when she wanted to control the conversation. "I've been thinking," she said slowly, "if this situation continues, the shelter, the instability, I might need to speak with the court about Maya's living arrangement." My stomach went cold. She was referring to the supplemental guardianship. When Marcus and I divorced, the family court had named Hazel as Maya's temporary supplemental guardian while I stabilized my housing. It was supposed to be a technical formality. It gave her no custody, but it gave her standing. Standing to file motions, standing to request evaluations, standing to tell a judge, "Your Honor, my granddaughter is living in a shelter. That's not an appropriate environment for a child." "I'm not threatening you," Hazel said, adjusting the collar of her coat. "I'm just concerned as her legal guardian." "Supplemental guardian," I corrected quietly. Same thing. It wasn't the same thing at all. But I didn't have a lawyer sitting beside me to explain that difference. Hazel stood, kissed Maya on the forehead, and raised her voice so anyone in the hallway could hear. "Be good for Mommy, okay? Grandma loves you so much." She signed the visitor log again on her way out. Date, February 3rd. Time, 4:20 p.m. That night, I started keeping a handwritten journal. Date, event, exact words spoken, who was present. I didn't have a clear name for what my mother was doing. I only knew one thing. It needed to be documented. A few days later, I found a studio apartment on Rainier Avenue, about 600 square feet, 1 block from a bus line. The landlord said he would hold it for 72 hours if I could put down $2,000. $2,000. That was the distance between my daughter drawing houses on a shelter floor and my daughter sleeping in a real bed behind a door I could lock. I called my mother one last time. "Mom, I found a place. I just need $2,000 for the deposit. I'll pay you back with my tax refund in March. 6 weeks. Hazel released a long, dramatic sigh, the kind she had perfected since I was 12. "Belinda, your father and I live on a fixed income. We simply don't have it." 2 weeks earlier, she had accidentally posted a photo in the family group chat before deleting it. I saw it before it disappeared. Henry Cooper leaning proudly against a brand new Chevrolet Silverado, holding up the keys in the driveway. Fixed income. "Mom, I'm asking for a loan, not a gift." "The answer is no," she replied. "And honestly, maybe this is God's way of teaching you to be more responsible." I held the phone away from my face and pressed my knuckles against my mouth. I counted slowly to 5. Then I lifted the phone again. "Okay, Mom." I let the apartment go. Later that night, Maya tugged gently on my sleeve while I was writing in my journal. "Mom, when are we going home?" "Soon, baby." The truth was, I no longer knew what soon meant. The word had stretched thin and shapeless, like something left in the rain too long. After Maya fell asleep, I opened the clear plastic folder again. It had grown thick. The eviction notice from Aurora Avenue, screenshots of Hazel's messages, screenshots of Derek's texts and Instagram posts, The visitor log entry, my handwritten journal pages, pay stubs from work, everything organized neatly with sticky tabs I had taken from the school supply closet. I didn't have a plan yet. I only had an instinct I couldn't explain. Keep everything. I closed the folder and slid it beneath my mattress. At that moment, I believed I had run out of options. I thought this was simply my life now. The constant hum of the hallway light, the vinyl mattress beneath my back, the word temporary slowly hardening into something permanent in my mind. That was what my life felt like. I thought this was simply how things would be now. I was wrong. Because 3 days later, a black sedan pulled into the shelter parking lot, and everything I believed about my family shattered like a plate hitting tile. It was a Saturday afternoon. The common room smelled faintly of canned tomato soup and damp wool from someone's coat drying over the back of a chair. Maya and I were sitting at our usual table. She was drawing again. I was pretending to grade papers while actually staring at my bank balance on my phone. That was when I heard a car door close outside. Through the window, I saw a black Lincoln Town Car, the kind of car that never pulled into the parking lot of Hope Harbor Family Shelter. An elderly woman stepped out. Her white hair was cut short. She wore a camel-colored cashmere coat. She moved slowly but with unmistakable purpose, the way people move when they have already made up their minds about something. She reached the front entrance and looked through the glass. Her eyes scanned the room, past the bulletin board filled with flyers for food banks and legal clinics, past the row of high chairs, past a woman folding laundry in the corner, until they landed on me. She stopped, and so did I. I hadn't seen my grandmother in almost 2 years. She looked thinner than I remembered. Her hair was shorter, but her eyes, sharp gray-blue eyes that never missed anything, were exactly the same. She walked inside. She crossed the room slowly. She looked at Maya, then at me, then toward our open doorway where the bunk bed was visible, and finally back at my face. "Belinda." Her voice broke on the second syllable. "What are you doing here?" "Grandma?" I whispered. She sat down beside me and took my hands. Her fingers were trembling. Then she asked the question that split my world open. "Why aren't you living in your house on Cedar Ridge Drive?" The room tilted. The fluorescent lights above us buzzed louder, as if the sound had crawled straight into my skull. "What house?" Margaret Langford stared at me. I stared back. Maya looked up from her drawing and said, "Hi," the way 6-year-olds say hello, simple and unbothered, like nothing in the world had just shifted. My grandmother reached into her handbag and pulled out her phone. She opened a document and turned the screen toward me. I saw my name. I saw an address. And I saw the words Irrevocable Trust and Beneficiary, Belinda Cooper, with a date from 2 years earlier. A trust deed for a house that legally belonged to me. A house I had never seen, never signed for, and never even heard about. "I don't understand," I said quietly. Margaret's jaw tightened. "Neither do I," she replied. "But I intend to." A few minutes later, Alicia Bennett brought us coffee in paper cups and quietly closed the door to the small meeting room without needing to be asked. Good case managers read situations quickly. One look at my face, one look at my grandmother's, and she understood we needed privacy. Margaret held the cup, but never took a sip. "After your grandfather passed," she began, "I sold most of the properties. I kept a few. One of them was a 3-bedroom house on Cedar Ridge Drive." She paused. "I bought it because I wanted you and Maya to live there." She explained that she had created the Langford Family Trust, naming me as the sole beneficiary. The house was mine, free and clear, with no mortgage. I gave the trust documents to Hazel, she said carefully, because she's my daughter. I trusted her. My chest tightened. Your mother told me you moved in last April. She sent photos of the kitchen, said you had hung new curtains. My mother had never given me curtains. My mother had never given me an address. She said you were happy, Margaret continued quietly, that Maya loved the backyard. My pulse pounded in my teeth. Grandma, I said slowly, I have never set foot in that house. I didn't even know it existed until about 60 seconds ago. Margaret placed her coffee cup on the table. Her hand was steady now. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. It was calm, precise. The voice of a woman who had spent 40 years running a real estate business and knew exactly what fraud looked like. And what, she asked carefully, did Hazel tell you about me? The floor seemed to tilt again. She said you wanted space, that after Grandpa died, you cut off contact, that you didn't want to hear from us anymore. Margaret frowned. I changed my phone number when I moved to Bellevue, she said. I gave the new number to your mother. She paused. Only your mother. The room fell silent. She told me you were in California, I whispered. In assisted living. Margaret's lips curved slightly, but the smile had a sharp edge. I'm 78 years old, Belinda. I live 12 miles from here. And for the past 2 years, I've been sending birthday cards to this zip code, believing they were reaching your house. She opened her phone again and pulled up a series of text messages from Hazel. Belinda loves the house, Mom. Thank you so much. Maya's room is painted yellow, her favorite color. Below the messages was a photograph. A bright kitchen, blue curtains, a bowl of fruit sitting on the counter. Margaret turned the phone toward me. Do you recognize this kitchen? I didn't, because it wasn't mine. Later we would learn, when Gerald Whitfield ran a reverse image search, that the photo came from a home staging website. A stock image downloaded and cropped to look personal. My mother had constructed an entire fictional life for me, complete with curtains and fruit bowls, and fed that story to my grandmother piece by piece, while my real life unfolded on a vinyl mattress beneath a buzzing fluorescent light. Margaret looked at me again. Then who has been living in that house for the past 2 years? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. We both already knew. That night, I called my mother from the shelter parking lot. Maya was inside with Alicia, coloring at the table. The February air cut through my coat as I stood beside the building. Before dialing, I turned on my phone's voice recorder. Washington is a one-party consent state. I had looked it up during my lunch break. Hazel answered on the 4th ring. Belinda, it's late. Mom, I said calmly. I saw Grandma today. Silence. Not the normal kind, the heavy kind that presses down on a conversation. That's impossible, she said finally. She's in assisted living in California. She was here, at the shelter. She showed me a trust deed for a house on Cedar Ridge Drive in my name. I could hear her breathing change, faster now, shallower. But when she spoke again, her voice sounded smooth and practiced. I have no idea what you're talking about. Your grandmother is confused, Belinda. She's having memory problems. You know that. I knew that wasn't true. Only 3 hours earlier, Margaret Langford had recited dates, dollar amounts, and lease terms from memory without pausing once. Mom, I said slowly, who is living in that house? Belinda, you need to calm down. You're stressed because of the shelter situation. You're not thinking clearly. Well, I'm thinking clearly enough to read a trust deed. I'll call your grandmother and straighten this out, she said quickly. Just don't do anything rash. Her voice dropped slightly. colder now. You know how courts feel about unstable mothers. There it was, the weapon, loaded and aimed in under 2 minutes. I let the silence stretch between us. Then I said quietly, "Good night, Mom." I hung up. I stopped the recording, saved the file, and added it to the records folder on my phone. For a long time, I stood alone in the parking lot. My breath drifted in small clouds in the cold air. A city bus rolled past on Lake City Way, its headlights sweeping across the wet pavement. She had called me unstable. She had called my grandmother confused. She had a smooth, ready explanation for everything. Everything except the address printed on that trust deed. And that told me all I needed to know. I went back inside, checked on Maya, already asleep with Captain, the stuffed bear tucked beneath her chin, and opened my journal. I wrote one line. She knows. She's not confused. She's not sorry. She's scared. And for the first time since we had moved into that shelter, I wasn't the one who felt afraid. That night, I lay awake in the dark, listening to Maya breathe above me, replaying the phone call again and again. My mother hadn't stumbled. She hadn't hesitated. She hadn't even asked if Maya was okay. She had simply denied everything with practiced ease, like she had been rehearsing that moment for years. And one thought kept circling my mind. How many times has she done this? How many times had I believed her without questioning it? Have you ever had that moment when the person you trusted most turns out to be the one who has been lying to you the longest? I'd like to know I'm not the only one. I couldn't sleep, so I did what I always do when my thoughts refused to settle. I went backward. I thought about summer camp. Every year, Derek went to Camp Tamuk, the one with the lake and the ropes course. I stayed home helping Hazel clean the house because, as she said, "Someone has to help Belinda. Derek needs the experience." I was 9 years old. I thought about the car. Derek got a used Honda for his 18th birthday. When I turned 18, Hazel told me, "Get a job, honey. That's the real gift." I laughed because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. I thought about college. I had been accepted to Oregon State with a partial scholarship. Hazel asked, "Are you sure you can afford the rest?" Derek dropped out of community college halfway through his second semester. "He's finding himself," Hazel told everyone. I thought about my wedding. A small backyard ceremony that Marcus and I paid for ourselves. My parents contributed nothing because they were saving for Derek's wedding. Derek wasn't even dating anyone. I thought about my divorce. 3 days after Marcus left, I called Hazel and asked if she could help with the attorney retainer. "You need to handle this on your own, Belinda," she said. "We can't keep rescuing you." She had never rescued me. Not once. 2 years earlier, when Derek divorced his first wife, Hazel paid his lawyer in full, $2,400. She even told the entire family about it at Thanksgiving, presenting it as a noble sacrifice. Lying on that shelter bunk, the pattern finally became clear. It had never been about money. It had never been about space. There was always money for Derek. There was always room for Derek. The answer was only no when I was the one asking. And it had been that way for as long as I could remember. I wasn't the black sheep. I was the invisible one. The daughter who existed only so the family portrait looked complete. The next morning, Margaret called and asked me to come to her house in Bellevue. Alicia offered to stay with Maya at the shelter. She was working a half day and said she didn't mind. I think she could see something shifting behind my eyes and wanted to make sure I had space to face it. Margaret's house was a modest craftsman on a quiet, tree-lined street. Not flashy. That was always her style. She greeted me at the door with tea already poured. A man was sitting at the dining table. "Belinda, this is Gerald Whitfield," she said. He was your grandfather's attorney for 23 years. I called him last night. Gerald was in his early 60s, gray-bearded and calm in the way people who spend their lives reading contracts tend to be calm. He shook my hand and opened a leather folder. I ran a search through the King County Recorder's Office database this morning, he said. Your property at 1847 Cedar Ridge Drive currently has a tenant. My stomach tightened. The lease was filed by Hazel Cooper, signing as... He turned a document toward me. Authorized agent for B. Cooper. I looked at the signature line. B. Cooper. The handwriting looked close to mine, but it wasn't mine. The loops were wrong. The capital B leaned too far to the right. She forged my signature, I said quietly. It appears that way, Gerald replied. He slid another page across the table, a spreadsheet he had assembled from county records and bank filings. Monthly rent collected, $2,450. Duration, 24 months. I did the calculation in my head before he said the number. Total collected, Gerald said calmly, $58,800. My throat tightened. Deposited into a joint account held by Hazel and Henry Cooper, he continued. None of it transferred to you. None of it reported to the Langford Family Trust. Margaret slowly set her teacup down. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice, but her sharp gray-blue eyes hardened in a way I had never seen before. My own daughter, she said quietly, stealing from her granddaughter and from a 6-year-old child. I stared at the number on the page. $58,800. That was the deposit for the apartment I had lost. That was 2 full years of stability I never had. That was clothes for Maya that weren't secondhand shirts with stains on the collar. That was every night I spent lying awake on a vinyl mattress, doing desperate math on the back of a receipt and still coming up short. Every dollar of it sat in Hazel Cooper's account. All of it. Gerald closed the folder slowly. There's more, he said. I looked up. She also opened a home equity line of credit on the property using your name. The room went completely still. Gerald explained it the way someone describes an injury, carefully, but without pretending it isn't bleeding. A home equity credit line, $42,000, opened 14 months earlier using forged documents. My name, my social security number, my supposed signature. The application listed my occupation as property manager, which I was not, and my address as 1847 Cedar Ridge Drive, a house I had never lived in. Where did the money go? I asked quietly. Gerald flipped to the next page. Bank statements. Not mine. Hazel and Henry Cooper's joint checking account. The withdrawals were highlighted in yellow. $12,000 to a home renovation contractor. Hazel and Henry's kitchen remodel, the one she proudly posted on Facebook last summer with the caption, "Finally got my dream kitchen. Blessed." $8,000 to Visa, Gerald continued. Credit card debt. $5,000 to a dealership, the down payment for Henry's Chevrolet Silverado. Then he pointed to the final entry. $12,000 transferred on June 14th to an account belonging to Derek Cooper. The same month Derek had posted the brand new Toyota Sequoia on Instagram. The same month he texted me, "Sorry, sis, we're tight right now." Gerald looked at me steadily. That brings the total to $100,800. Rental income plus the equity draw taken from your property without your knowledge or consent. I gripped the edge of Margaret's dining table. The wood felt cool and smooth beneath my fingers. $100,800. While Maya sat on shelter floors drawing houses she didn't have, while I ate canned soup under fluorescent lights, while my mother told me this was God's way of teaching me responsibility, Gerald lowered his glasses slightly and looked at me. This is fraud, Belinda. Forgery. Theft by deception. He spoke calmly. We can go to the police. We can file a civil lawsuit. Or both. Margaret reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. What do you want to do? I didn't answer right away. I sat with the number, the forged signatures. Derek's SUV. Hazel's dream kitchen. Henry's truck. All of it built on a house my grandmother had given me so my daughter would have a home. Finally, I said quietly, I want my daughter to have her house. My voice was steady. I want every dollar returned. And I want them to know, in front of everyone, exactly what they did. Margaret nodded once. Gerald picked up his pen. That night, I returned to the shelter and pulled the clear plastic folder from under my mattress. It was already thick. Now it needed to become a case. I went to a dollar store and bought a blue 3-ring binder, the only color they had, and a pack of tabbed dividers. After Maya fell asleep, I sat on a lower bunk and began building it section by section. Tab 1. The Trust. Margaret had given me a certified copy from Gerald's office, embossed seal, notarized, every page initialed, my name printed clearly in black ink. Date, April 23rd, 2 years earlier. Tab 2, Property Records. County Recorder search showing 1,847 Cedar Ridge Drive. The lease filing. The home equity loan documents. Tab 3, The forged lease. B. Cooper, written in handwriting that wasn't mine, authorizing a rental agreement I had never seen. Tab 4, Screenshots. Hazel's texts. Stop being dramatic. Lots of people go through hard times. Derek's message. Sorry, sis. We're tight right now. Derek's Instagram post, the SUV. Caption, blessed. The photo Hazel accidentally posted in the family chat. Henry holding the keys to his new truck. Every image time-stamped. Every file saved. Tab 5, the phone recording. Hazel's voice, calm and practiced, calling my grandmother confused and calling me unstable, while casually mentioning the court. Tab 6, my shelter journal. Every entry dated and timed. Hazel's visit, her threat about guardianship, the visitor log she signed. The next day, Gerald added 2 more documents. The reverse image search results proving the kitchen photo Hazel had sent Margaret was a stock image taken from a home staging website, and Alicia Bennett's sworn affidavit, notarized, confirming that Belinda Cooper and her minor daughter Maya Cooper had been residents of Hope Harbor Family Shelter since January 17th. The affidavit also stated that I was a responsible and cooperative parent, and that my daughter was safe, healthy, and properly cared for. When I finished, I sat there holding the binder in my lap. It was heavier than I expected. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is loud, emotional, chaotic. This was something else. This was documentation, and I was a teacher. Grading papers and collecting evidence had always been part of my job. I knew how to organize evidence. Gerald Whitfield drove me to Cedar Ridge Drive on a Wednesday morning. I had taken a personal day from work, telling the front office I had an appointment, which technically wasn't a lie. The street was quiet and residential. Birch trees lined both sides, still bare from winter but beginning to show faint green at their tips. The homes were older, craftsman-style houses with covered porches and steep roofs, the kind of neighborhood where people felt comfortable leaving strollers on their front steps. Number 1,847 stood behind a white picket fence. A small front yard stretched toward the sidewalk, winter jasmine just starting to bloom along the walkway. The house had blue shutters and a porch light that was still glowing even though it was nearly 10 in the morning. Gerald walked up and knocked. A young woman opened the door, late 20s, holding a coffee mug, clearly surprised to see a gray-bearded man in a suit standing on her porch. "Good morning," Gerald said politely. "My name is Gerald Whitfield. I'm an attorney representing the legal owner of this property. May I speak with you for a moment?" She called for her husband. They stood together in the doorway, confused but cooperative. They had been renting the house for 22 months. They paid $2,450 a month to a woman named Hazel Cooper, who told them she owned the house. She said it was her investment property, the husband explained. She seemed normal. Nice, actually. Gerald nodded and took careful notes. They brought out their lease. There it was again. The same forged signature. B. Cooper. Gerald photographed every page. I stayed on the sidewalk. I couldn't bring myself to step inside. Not yet. But through the front window, I could see a small room just off the hallway. A bedroom. Empty except for built-in shelves beneath the window. It was exactly the right size for a twin bed, a small drawing desk, and a bookshelf. The room I had imagined for Maya every night for the past 2 years, without knowing it already existed. In the backyard, visible through the fence, a tire swing hung from a large oak tree. The tenant told us it had been there when they moved in. Maya would have loved that swing. She would have loved everything about that house. I turned away before the tears started. Gerald was already speaking quietly into his phone as we walked back to the car. "The tenants are cooperating," he said. "They're victims here as well. They paid rent in good faith to someone who had no authority to collect it." He ended the call and looked at me. "We'll give them proper notice. 60 days. We'll do this by the book." By the book. I held on to those words the way you hold on to a railing when climbing a staircase you're not sure you can manage. The next afternoon, Gerald laid everything out at Margaret's dining table. Legal pad, numbered list, a pen that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. "Step 1, he said. Notice to vacate to the current tenants. 60 days under Washington statute. They've been cooperative. I don't anticipate problems. Step 2. Margaret, as grantor of the Langford Family Trust, executes an amendment removing Hazel's informal access and appointing a new successor trustee. I recommend myself on an interim basis. Step 3. We file a fraud complaint with the King County District Attorney's Office. Forgery, theft by deception, identity theft related to the home equity loan. Step 4. Civil litigation for restitution. Full recovery of $100,800 plus legal costs. He looked up from his notes. Any questions? Yes, I said. All of that. But there's one more thing. Margaret, who had been listening quietly with her hands folded in her lap, looked at me. The party, she said softly. The following Saturday was Hazel and Henry Cooper's 35th wedding anniversary. The invitations had gone out weeks earlier. Heavy cardstock, gold lettering. Hazel had arranged the catering herself. The entire extended family would be there. Cousins, aunts, uncles, church friends, neighbors. 30 people, maybe more. 30 people who had spent years hearing Hazel's version of me. The struggling daughter. The dramatic one, the ungrateful child, 30 people who nodded sympathetically whenever Hazel said, "I've done everything for that girl." She spent years building that story, I said quietly. I looked at Gerald. I want everyone in that room to hear the real one. Not because I wanted to humiliate her, because I was tired of being asked why I never appreciated my parents. Gerald considered this for a moment. "I can prepare a formal demand letter," he said. "Summary of findings, notice of legal action, restitution terms, certified documentation. You could deliver it at the event." Hand-delivered, I said. To her face. Margaret glanced at Gerald. Gerald looked back at me. I'll have it ready by Friday, he said. Margaret reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'll make sure we're both invited. Before anything else could happen, though, I needed to remove the chain my mother still had around my throat. On Monday morning, Gerald filed a motion to terminate the supplemental guardianship Hazel held over Maya. The legal grounds were clear. I had stable employment. I had a verified residence incoming, 1847 Cedar Ridge Drive, documented in the trust. I had a support network, including Margaret, and the current supplemental guardian, Hazel Cooper, was under active fraud investigation involving my identity and property. That created a clear conflict of interest. Alicia Bennett's affidavit was included in the filing. So was a letter from Maya's school counselor confirming regular attendance and healthy development. My pay stubs were attached. So was the shelter's case file documenting consistent cooperation and responsible parenting. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday. Hazel was not notified ahead of time. Gerald filed under expedited procedure, citing the conflict of interest. Without opposition, the judge reviewed the packet privately in chambers. I was sitting in the staff room at Green Lake Elementary, grading spelling tests during my lunch break, when the email arrived. Order terminating supplemental guardianship. Case number 24-FG-1127. The court had removed Hazel Cooper's legal standing over my daughter. Sole legal and physical custody of the minor child, MC, is hereby restored to the petitioner, Belinda Cooper, effective immediately. I read the order once, then again, then a third time. After that, I lowered my head onto the table between a pile of second-grade worksheets and a cold cup of coffee, and cried quietly. There were teachers in the next room, so I tried to stay silent, but the tears slid down my wrists and dripped onto the Formica tabletop. For more than a year, I had tiptoed around my mother, because she held that guardianship like a grenade. You know how courts feel about unstable mothers. Every time I thought about pushing back, I heard that sentence in my head. Not anymore. I wiped my face before the bell rang, washed my hands in the staff restroom, returned to my classroom, and spent the afternoon teaching long division to 22 7-year-olds. That evening, Gerald Whitfield emailed me the final version of the certified letter. 4 pages. A detailed summary of the fraud, a formal demand for restitution, notice of pending legal action. It was printed on firm letterhead and sealed inside a white envelope stamped in red, certified mail. I held the envelope in my hands. It weighed almost nothing. By Saturday night, it would carry a great deal more weight. Margaret came to the shelter on Friday. She signed the visitor log the same way Hazel had weeks earlier. The difference was that this visit was genuine. Maya was shy at first. She hid behind my leg, peeking around me the way she did with strangers, which, in some ways, Margaret still was. The last time they had been in the same room, Maya had barely been 4. Margaret didn't push. She simply sat down at the table in the common room, placed her handbag beside her chair, and set a small wooden box on the table. It was polished smooth, with a tiny brass latch. When she opened it, Maya gasped. Inside were 48 colored pencils, not crayons, real pencils with deep, rich colors and perfectly sharpened points. "I heard you like to draw," Margaret said softly, sliding the box toward her. "Will you show me?" Maya's eyes widened. She slowly stepped out from behind me and sat across from Margaret, running her fingertips over the pencils like she wasn't sure they were truly meant for her. "Can I use these?" she asked carefully. "They're yours." Maya picked up a violet pencil first, then green. Then she started drawing the way she always did, fast, confident, her tongue poking slightly out of the corner of her mouth as she concentrated. She drew a house. Of course she did. A big window, a walkway to the door, a tree in the yard, and hanging from one of the branches was a circle. A swing. Margaret looked up at me. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't let the tears fall, not in front of Maya. "This is the house I want to live in," Maya said proudly, holding up the drawing. Margaret studied the picture for a long moment. Then she spoke gently. "Can I tell you something, Maya? You already have a house, and we're going to bring you there. I promise." Maya looked over at me. I nodded. "Grandma keeps her promises," I said. Margaret leaned closer to me while Maya returned to her drawing. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I lost 2 years with her," she said. "I won't lose another day." Later, I folded Maya's drawing carefully and slipped it into the blue binder behind the final tab. It didn't belong with the legal documents, the trust deed, the bank records, the forged signatures. But in truth, it belonged there more than any of them. It was the reason for all of this. Saturday morning, the day of the anniversary party, Maya slept late. I had been awake since 4 a.m. In the dim blue-gray light of the shelter room, I sat on the edge of the bunk bed and went through the binder again, tab by tab. Court order terminating guardianship. Certified demand letter. Trust deed from the Langford Family Trust. Printed screenshots from the library. 4 to a page. Phone recording transferred onto a USB drive Alicia had lent me. Reverse image search results. Everything documented. Everything numbered. Everything dated the same way I organized my lesson plans. Because if teaching 2nd grade had taught me anything, it was this. If it isn't written down, it didn't happen. Alicia Bennett stopped by our room around 7 that morning. She wasn't working that day, but she had volunteered to watch Maya for the evening. She planned to bring her to Margaret's house before the party started. Maya would not be attending that anniversary dinner. I made sure of that. "You okay?" Alicia asked quietly from the doorway. "I'm terrified," I admitted. She leaned against the frame and nodded. "Good," she said. "That means you care enough to do this right." I got dressed in the communal bathroom. A white blouse, the one I usually wore for parent-teacher conferences, black slacks, a dark blazer Alicia had lent me that was slightly too big in the shoulders. No jewelry, no makeup except the half-used lipstick I found at the bottom of my purse. I looked at myself in the mirror above the sink. A woman standing in borrowed clothes inside a shelter bathroom. The fluorescent light buzzed above me, the same endless hum that had followed me every night for the past 2 months. But this time, it didn't sound the same. Tomorrow, I told myself, I wouldn't hear that humming light anymore. Not tomorrow, not the day after, not the week after. Maya and I would be somewhere else. Somewhere with walls that belonged to us and a door that locked from the inside. But first, there was tonight. I slipped the blue binder into my bag, zipped it shut, and walked back to our room. Maya was already awake, sitting upright on the top bunk with Captain tucked in her lap. "Where are you going, Mommy?" "To see some family, baby," I said. "Alicia's going to take you to Grandma Margaret's house tonight. You're having a sleepover." Her face lit up immediately. "Can I bring my pencils?" "Of course." I kissed her forehead. Her hair smelled like the coconut shampoo I bought from the drugstore, the one small thing I refused to compromise on. No matter what else we lost, my daughter would always smell like something warm and good. I picked up my bag. The binder shifted inside, solid and heavy. My hands were shaking. My mind was perfectly clear. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, a message from my cousin Rachel Hayes popped up while I was braiding Maya's hair for the sleepover. "Hey, just a heads up. Your mom's been telling people at church that you're having mental health issues. She says she's been financially supporting you for months, but you keep pushing her away. People are buying it. Uncle Tom even gave a speech about it at Bible study. Thought you should know. I read the message twice. Then I set my phone down and finished the braid. I wasn't surprised. This was Hazel's standard playbook, the preemptive strike. By the time I walked into that anniversary party, 30 people would already believe I was unstable, ungrateful, maybe even addicted to something. Hazel would hug me in front of everyone, and they'd think she was a saint for inviting me at all. I had watched her run this script my entire life. The only difference now was that I knew the lines ahead of time. Another message appeared. I don't believe her, by the way. Something about the story always felt off. Are you okay? I'm fine, I typed back. Are you coming tonight? Yeah. Good, I replied. Keep your phone charged. I called Gerald. Letters ready, he confirmed. Original copies are secured in my office safe. The ones in your binder are legally sufficient. If Hazel's attorney tries anything tonight, call me immediately. Next, I called Margaret. She planned to arrive separately. Her driver would drop her off around 6:30. Hazel had no idea she was coming. The invitation had gone through Derek. Margaret had told him she wanted to surprise your mother for the anniversary. Apparently, Derek said, "That's so sweet, Grandma." Finally, I spoke with Alicia, who was already at the shelter with an overnight bag and a stack of coloring books under her arm. She was ready to take Maya to Bellevue the moment I left. I knelt down in front of Maya and held her face gently in my hands. Have fun tonight, okay? I will. Draw something for Grandma Margaret. I'll draw her house, Maya said proudly. That sounds perfect. I let go of her, picked up my bag, walked out of Hope Harbor Family Shelter into the late afternoon rain. Then I got into my car and drove toward my parents' house with a blue binder, a certified letter, and absolutely nothing left to lose. My parents' house was glowing like a stage set. Every window was lit. Cars lined the driveway and spilled down the street. Through the large front window, I could see people moving around inside, holding plates, laughing, talking, aunts, uncles, cousins, church friends. An anniversary banner stretched across the living room wall in gold script. Happy 35th anniversary, Hazel and Henry. I sat in my car for 90 seconds, counting my breaths. The bag rested on the passenger seat beside me, heavy, ready. Then I stepped out. The front door was open. The smell hit me immediately. Catered lasagna, garlic bread, Hazel's famous lemon cake, the one she baked whenever she wanted people telling her how wonderful she was. 30 faces turned toward me. You can feel a room shift when someone enters unexpectedly. The energy recalibrates. I saw it in their expressions. Pity from Aunt Mary, awkward discomfort from Uncle Tom, a tight smile from Natalie, Derek's wife, who quickly looked down at her shoes. They had all been briefed. They knew I was struggling. They knew Hazel was doing her best. They had already chosen a side. And they had chosen it based on a lie. Derek stood near the buffet table holding a beer, staring at the floor. Then, Hazel Cooper stepped out of the kitchen. She wore a cream blouse, pearl necklace, perfectly styled hair, the full anniversary armor. When she saw me, her smile froze for half a second. Then it reshaped itself into something warm and generous. "Belinda, honey," she said brightly, "I'm so glad you came." She crossed the room, arms open, and pulled me into a hug that smelled like Chanel No. 5 and hairspray. I didn't hug her back. My arms stayed at my sides. "Hi, Mom." She held my shoulders, smiling sweetly for the room while leaning close enough that only I could hear her. "Behave yourself tonight, Belinda," she whispered. "Don't you dare make a scene in front of our guests." Her voice was soft against my ear, but her grip on my shoulders tightened like a warning. I looked her directly in the eyes. "I wouldn't dream of it." She released my shoulders, smoothed the front of her blouse, and turned back toward her guests, just as the doorbell rang. Henry went to answer it, and there, framed in the porch light, stood Margaret Langford, 5'3", white hair, cashmere coat, 78 years old, and very clearly not in California. Hazel's face went white. Not pale, white, the color of paper, the color of surrender. "Mother," she whispered. "Surprise," Margaret said calmly. The room shifted instantly, the way rooms do when a matriarch arrives. Margaret Langford was not the kind of woman people forgot. She and my grandfather had built a real estate business from nothing. She had funded college scholarships for 2 nephews and still mailed handwritten Christmas cards to 46 people every year. When she entered a room, people instinctively straightened. "Margaret! Oh my goodness, we haven't seen you in years!" Aunt Mary reached her first, followed by Uncle Tom and cousins whose names I barely remembered. They gathered around her, hugs, handshakes, genuine warmth. Margaret greeted each of them with quiet grace, the way a woman used to respect moves through a room. I stood near the hallway and watched Hazel. She hadn't moved from the kitchen doorway. Her hand clutched the frame. Her knuckles had turned pale. Margaret finally made her way through the crowd and stopped in front of her daughter. She embraced Hazel lightly, one arm around her shoulders, a polite pat on the back. "Hazel," she said, "you look well. How are things?" Hazel's voice sounded overly bright. "Mom, what a surprise! I thought you were... I didn't know you were... in California?" Margaret finished smoothly. She smiled. "No, I moved back to Bellevue last year." Then she turned toward the room, still smiling. "Didn't Hazel tell you?" Several people glanced awkwardly toward my mother. Hazel laughed, a short, brittle sound. "I must have forgotten to mention it." Margaret accepted a glass of water from Henry, who looked like he would rather be digging a hole in the backyard. She sat down in an armchair near the buffet table. Slowly, the room settled around her again. Then, in the tone of someone making casual conversation, she asked, "So, have any of you visited Belinda's house on Cedar Ridge Drive?" "The one I gave her." The room went quiet. Not dramatic silence, confused silence. The kind where people glance at each other just to confirm they heard correctly. Hazel crossed the room quickly. "Mom, let's not talk about real estate tonight," she said. "It's a party." Margaret took a small sip of water. "Of course," she said lightly. "I simply assumed everyone knew. I bought the house for Belinda and Maya 2 years ago. 3 bedrooms, lovely street." She looked across the room at me. "Belinda, have you been enjoying it?" Every head in the room turned toward me, then toward Hazel, then back to me again. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The silence was doing its job. A red flush crept up Hazel's neck from the collar of her cream blouse. Low murmurs began around the room. People were waiting for an explanation. Hazel opened her mouth, but I stood before she could fill the air with another lie. "Since Grandma brought it up," I said calmly, "I think everyone here deserves to hear the truth." My voice sounded steady. I don't know how, because my pulse was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. But after 2 months of swallowing silence in a shelter, I was done. "I have never been inside that house," I continued. "I didn't even know it existed until 1 week ago." The murmuring stopped instantly. Hazel stepped toward me. "Belinda, stop. You're confused. You've been under a lot of stress." "I'm not confused, Mom." I kept my eyes on the room instead of looking at her. "I found out about the house because Grandma walked into the Hope Harbor family shelter where Maya and I have been living for the past 2 months. 30 faces. 30 frozen expressions. Aunt Mary covered her mouth. Uncle Tom's jaw actually dropped. I had always thought that phrase was just a metaphor. Apparently it wasn't. A shelter? One of Hazel's church friends whispered. Yes, I said clearly. Hope Harbor Family Shelter, on Lake City Way. Maya and I have been there since January 17th. Bunk beds, communal bathrooms, canned soup for dinner. I paused just long enough for the image to settle in the room. Meanwhile, I continued, the house Grandma bought for us, the one she trusted Mom to give me, has been rented out for the past 2 years. Henry rose abruptly from the couch. That is enough, Belinda. I looked at him. His face was bright red. One thick finger pointed straight at me. The universal gesture of a man who has no argument, but plenty of volume. Sit down, Dad, I said quietly. I'm not finished. He didn't sit, but he didn't interrupt again either. Mom rented the house using a forged lease, I continued. My name, my signature, neither of which I gave. She collected $58,800 in rent. She also took out a $42,000 home equity loan against the property. Also in my name, also without my knowledge. I let the final number land clearly in the room. Total amount taken, $100,800. I spoke the number slowly. I wanted it hanging in the air. I wanted every person there to feel the weight of it. All of it deposited into Mom and Dad's joint bank account, I said, while my daughter sat on the floor of a homeless shelter, drawing pictures of houses she didn't have. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Behind Hazel, the happy 35th anniversary banner hung crookedly against the wall, like a prop from a play that had suddenly gone wrong. Hazel's voice cracked. That is a lie! She turned desperately toward Margaret. Mother, tell them she's lying! Margaret placed her water glass gently on the table. I wish she were. I reached into my bag. The room was so silent, I could hear the lasagna bubbling quietly in the catering tray on the sideboard. Someone's phone vibrated once behind me. Later, I would learn that Rachel had already begun texting her sister. Call me right now. I pulled out the white envelope. The red, certified mail stamp glowed under the overhead lights. This, I said calmly, is a formal demand letter prepared by attorney Gerald Whitfield, representing both myself and the Langford Family Trust. I placed the envelope carefully on the table between the lemon cake and a vase of grocery store tulips. It contains a certified copy of the trust deed naming me as the sole beneficiary of 1,847 Cedar Ridge Drive, a copy of the lease agreement you signed using a forged version of my signature, bank records showing $58,800 in rent deposited into your account over 24 months, and statements from the home equity loan showing $42,000 drawn against my property using fraudulent documents. I listed each item the same way I would read a grading rubric to my second graders. Calm, precise, not a word wasted. And finally, I continued, a notice confirming that a fraud complaint has been filed with the King County District Attorney's Office. Hazel stared at the envelope. She didn't touch it. Her hands hung stiffly at her sides, fingers curled and trembling. Henry's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Then I reached into my bag one last time and removed a single sheet of paper. There's also this. I held it up so everyone could see. A court order issued last Thursday terminating your supplemental guardianship over Maya. Effective immediately. Sole custody has been restored to me. That was the moment she finally broke. Not the money, not the fraud charges, the guardianship. The leash she had kept around my neck for over a year. You can't do this, Hazel whispered. Her voice had lost its smooth confidence. It sounded thin now, stripped down to something raw. I am your mother. I looked at her. My mother, standing in a cream blouse and pearls beneath an anniversary banner celebrating 35 years of marriage, partly funded with money stolen from her own granddaughter. "And I am Maya's mother," I said quietly. "That's the only title that matters to me tonight." I placed the court order on top of the envelope and stepped back. "You had 2 years to do the right thing. You had 2 years to hand me the key to that house. Instead, you watched your granddaughter sleep in a shelter. So no, you don't get to call yourself my mother tonight." The room didn't gasp. It was worse. It simply absorbed the truth. 30 people standing in the living room decorated for celebration, absorbing the fact that the woman who baked the lemon cake had stolen a house from her own daughter. Hazel began to cry. Not the quiet kind, the dramatic kind, the kind that turns outward, searching for an audience. She pressed both hands to her chest and looked around the room. "Do you see?" she said shakily. "Do you see what she's doing to me on our anniversary? After everything I've done for her, I raised her. I sacrificed everything." She turned toward Aunt Mary. Mary didn't move. She looked toward Uncle Tom. Tom stared down at the floor. Henry stepped in front of Hazel like a shield. "This family is falling apart because of you, Belinda," he snapped. "You always have to make everything about yourself." I didn't answer him. Instead, I turned toward Rachel, who was standing near the bookshelf with her phone in her hand. "Rachel," I said calmly, "would you mind reading something out loud?" I handed her my phone, already open to the screenshot album. Rachel looked down at the screen. Her eyes scanned the messages. Then she began reading aloud, clearly and steadily, the way someone reads testimony in court. "Text message from Hazel Cooper, January 24th, 9:47 p.m. Stop being dramatic. Lots of people go through hard times. The room visibly flinched. Rachel scrolled. "Text from Hazel Cooper, February 1st, 11:12 a.m. The answer is no. And frankly, maybe this is God's way of telling you to be more responsible." Hazel lunged forward. "Those are out of context!" Rachel kept reading. "Text from Derek Cooper, January 28th, 8:03 a.m. Sorry, sis, we're tight right now. Mom says you should apply for Section 8. Rachel lowered the phone slowly and looked directly at her aunt. "Were you tight, Aunt Hazel?" She tilted the screen toward the room. "Because the loan records show $42,000 sitting in your account when Belinda asked for $2,000 for a deposit." Hazel turned desperately toward Margaret. Now the tears were real, but they still weren't the right kind. Not regret, not shame. The tears of someone watching their story collapse in real time. "Mother, please," she said. "I can explain everything. It was just a misunderstanding." Margaret didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "A misunderstanding," she said calmly, "does not come with a forged signature." The lemon cake sat untouched on the table. The tulips had started leaning sideways in their vase, and my mother stood in the middle of her own anniversary party, surrounded by 30 people who could no longer meet her eyes. Rachel wasn't finished. She turned toward the corner of the room where Derek had been standing all evening, silent, still holding the same beer. "Derek," she said, "did you know about any of this?" Every head turned toward him. Derek's face was red, not angry red, caught red. He shifted awkwardly. "I didn't know the details," he said quickly. "I just thought Mom was managing some property for Grandma." I spoke before anyone else could. "The loan records show a $12,000 transfer into your personal account on June 14th for the down payment on your SUV." The same SUV. The one he posted on Instagram with the caption, #blessed. The same month he told me he couldn't help with a deposit. Derek opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "I thought that was Mom's money," he said weakly. "She told me it was a loan from her savings." "It wasn't her money," Margaret said calmly from her chair. Her tone was even and factual, like someone reviewing a balance sheet. "It was drawn from a loan taken fraudulently against your sister's property." "A property I purchased so that your niece would have a home." "The same niece who has been sleeping in a shelter." Derek slowly set his beer down on the mantel. He didn't pick it up again. Uncle Tom spoke for the first time since the confrontation began. His voice sounded heavy. "Hazel, I vouched for you. I told people in this room, people in this family, that Belinda was the problem. That she was ungrateful. That you were doing your best." He shook his head slowly. "You made me a liar." Aunt Mary whispered, barely audible, "I can't believe this." "You stole from your own granddaughter." Hazel's composure finally shattered, not into remorse, but into defiance. "That's not stealing!" she shouted. Her voice ricocheted across the room. "It's family money. My mother gave it to me and I managed it the way I thought best." Margaret didn't raise her voice. "I gave it to Belinda," she said quietly. Her words landed with absolute certainty. Then she added, "In 78 years, I have never been more ashamed of my own child." The room held that sentence like a suspended breath. Hazel looked around at the 30 faces that had been smiling only minutes earlier while she cut the cake and toasted her marriage. The same people who had believed her version of events for years. Now, there was nothing. No sympathy, no rescue, no one left to perform for. Without another word, she turned and walked down the hallway toward the bathroom. Henry followed, and the door closed behind them. The anniversary banner above the buffet hung crooked now, one corner drooping where the tape had given up. No one bothered fixing it. I left before anyone began cleaning up. I drove to Margaret's house, lifted a sleeping Maya from the guest bed, carried her to the car, and buckled her in carefully with Captain tucked between her and the seatbelt. She never woke. On the drive back to the shelter, the last drive there, I told myself, the very last one, my phone buzzed twice. One message from Gerald confirming that the demand letter had been officially delivered, with Rachel and Uncle Tom present as witnesses. The second was from Priya, a photo Maya had drawn earlier that evening at Margaret's house, a little house with a yellow door and 3 stick figures standing in front. I saved both messages. The following week, Gerald did what Gerald always does. He moved paper. Monday. A civil lawsuit was filed in King County Superior Court against Hazel and Henry Cooper. Fraud, forgery, conversion, breach of fiduciary duty. Total damages requested, $100,800, plus legal fees and court costs. Tuesday. The fraud complaint was formally accepted by the King County District Attorney's Office. Charges included first-degree forgery and identity theft, both felony offenses. Wednesday. Gerald notified the bank that issued the home equity loan. The bank reviewed the documents and quickly determined the signatures were fraudulent. Within 48 hours, the credit line was frozen and an internal investigation began. Hazel and Henry were now personally responsible for the $42,000 balance. If they failed to repay it, the bank would pursue its own criminal referral. Thursday. The 60-day eviction notice for the tenants at 1847 Cedar Ridge Drive reached its second week. They were good people, caught in Hazel's lie, and had already begun searching for another apartment. Gerald returned their deposit from Margaret's funds as a gesture of goodwill. No hard feelings. On Friday evening, Gerald called. Their attorney reached out today, he said. Used the word untenable. That's lawyer language for we're going to lose. I sat on my shelter bunk, hopefully for one of the final times, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not happiness, not yet. Something quieter. Traction. For 2 months it had felt like sinking. Now the ground under my feet was finally solid. You'll have your house by April, Gerald said. April. 2 months away. Maya's pencils. Maya's swing. Maya's room with the built-in shelves. 2 months. I could do 2 months. The call came 2 weeks after the party. Hazel used Derek's phone because mine had blocked hers. I almost didn't answer, but part of me needed to hear her try. Belinda, she said. Her voice sounded smaller now, stripped of its polish. Please, can we talk? You have 2 minutes, I replied. Please drop the charges, she rushed. We'll pay you back, every dollar, I swear. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. I can't sleep. The whole family won't speak to us. Pastor Reynolds asked us not to come to church until this is resolved. She inhaled shakily. I'm begging you. I stood in the shelter hallway while the fluorescent light hummed overhead. Somewhere down the corridor, a toddler was laughing. The kind of carefree laugh that doesn't know anything about fraud, forged signatures, or stolen houses. Mom, I said slowly, you had 2 years. 730 days. Every single one of those days you could have called me and said, Belinda, there's a house. It's yours. Here's the key. And every single one of those days you chose not to. I know, she whispered. But you watched me beg you for $2,000 while you sat on more than $100,000. You told me God was teaching me responsibility. You told Grandma I was already living in the house. You told the family I was mentally unstable. And you used Maya's guardianship to keep me quiet. Silence. So no, I said. I'm not dropping the charges. I'm your mother, she said weakly. Doesn't that mean anything? It meant everything to me, I answered. That's why this hurts. But I have a daughter too. And she is never going to grow up wondering whether her mother protected her. I heard Hazel inhale to speak again. I didn't give her the chance. You didn't destroy this family, Mom, I said. You just built it on a lie. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just turning on the lights. Then I hung up, blocked Derek's number, and walked into the common room. Maya was sitting at the table, drawing with the colored pencils Margaret had given her. She looked up when I sat beside her. What are we drawing today? I asked. Our new house, she said, with the swing. I picked up a green pencil and began sketching the tree beside it. Sometimes I still wonder if my mother ever truly saw me. Not the version she described to relatives, the dramatic one, the ungrateful one, the daughter who was always struggling. Not the scapegoat she needed for her story. Just me. The woman who woke up at 5:30 every morning to pack lunches, graded spelling tests during her lunch break, and never once asked for anything she wasn't rightfully owed. Sometimes, I wonder whether people like my mother ever truly change, or if they simply move on and find someone new to control. Honestly, I don't know. But I do know the choice I made. What do you think? 4 weeks after the anniversary party, Hazel and Henry's attorney called Gerald and used one word: settle. Gerald explained the terms while I sat in my car in the school parking lot during my planning period. The engine was off and the heater was fading. He went through everything carefully. Restitution. The $58,800 in rent Hazel had taken from my house would be repaid over 36 months. $1,633 per month deposited directly into a trust-managed account. The first payment would begin within 30 days. Home equity loan. Hazel and Henry would repay the $42,000 balance to the bank in full within 90 days. If they failed, the bank would pursue its own criminal referral. Derek. The $12,000 he received would be returned over 12 months, $1,000 per month. No extensions, no excuses. Then Gerald explained the criminal agreement. The district attorney agreed to reduce the forgery charge from a felony to a misdemeanor, but only if every restitution payment was made on time and Hazel completed 3 years of supervised probation. Miss a payment, and the felony charge would return immediately. Then Gerald read the final clause. Hazel and Henry Cooper acknowledge full responsibility for the actions described and waive any future claim to the property located at 1847 Cedar Ridge Drive. He paused. Do you accept these terms? I looked through the windshield toward the school building. On the second floor, I could see my classroom. The alphabet border on the wall, the reading corner, the desk drawer where I kept granola bars for kids who came to school hungry. 22 second graders would walk into that room after lunch, expecting me to teach them fractions. Yes, I said quietly. I accept. Henry sold the Chevrolet Silverado the following week. He got $28,000 for it. Hazel lost her job at the dental clinic not long after. The practice manager cited conduct inconsistent with company values once the misdemeanor charge became public record. The tenants at Cedar Ridge Drive moved out on March 29th, 1 day before the 60-day deadline. They left the tire swing. Gerald called me that evening. The house is empty, he said. It's yours. I signed the papers the next morning. A trust distribution confirmation, a new deed, and a key. One silver key, warm in my hand. Justice didn't feel triumphant. It wasn't supposed to. It felt right. And for the first time in more than 2 years, something in my life felt exactly right. April 1st. Not a joke, not a dream. Seattle rain fell softly, the kind that sounds like someone gently shushing a baby. The birch trees along the street had filled with pale green leaves since the last time I stood on that sidewalk. I unlocked the door. The house opened into a small foyer with hardwood floors and a coat hook by the wall. Beyond it was a living room with built-in bookshelves and a wide front window. The kitchen was to the right, smaller than the fake photo Hazel had sent my grandmother, but real. My kitchen. My counter. My window above the sink looking out toward the oak tree in the backyard. Maya pushed past me and stopped in the middle of the living room. She slowly turned in a circle, taking everything in. The high ceiling, the fireplace, the sunlight pouring through the windows. Then she spotted the backyard through the sliding door. "Mom!" she gasped. "There's a swing!" She ran outside. I let her. Priya arrived 20 minutes later with the boxes from the shelter. There weren't many. 3 suitcases, a bag of Maya's art supplies, Captain the Bear, and the blue binder, which I placed on the kitchen counter and decided I would keep forever. Margaret came soon after, her driver carrying a box of kitchen essentials, pots, plates, dish towels, a kettle. She placed a small vase of fresh daffodils on the counter. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Maya's room was the small bedroom on the left, with the built-in shelves under the window, exactly the room I had imagined from the sidewalk. We set up the twin bed Margaret had ordered, placed the colored pencils neatly along the shelf. Then I took the drawing Maya made in the shelter, the house with the big window and the swing, and taped it to the wall above her bed. That night, for the first time in 74 days, I tucked my daughter into her own room. I read her the fox story I had invented during our first night in the shelter. She fell asleep before the ending. I stood in the doorway and listened. No fluorescent lights humming, no strangers crying down the hallway, no vinyl mattress crinkling every time someone moved, just rain on the roof, Maya's slow, steady breathing, and the quiet sound of the house settling around us like it had been waiting. I walked into my room, my bed, my door that locked from the inside. I lay down in the dark and cried, but these weren't the shelter tears, the ones I swallowed so Maya wouldn't hear. These were different. These were the tears of a woman who, after 2 long years, had finally stopped drowning. And the quiet in that house was different. Not the kind of quiet you hear in a shelter, where silence means someone down the hall is trying not to cry. This was the quiet of a home, where silence simply means everyone inside is safe. 6 months later, in October, the birch trees on our street turned bright gold, and Maya said they looked like candles. She started 2nd grade at Fernwood Elementary, just a 5-minute walk away. Every morning I walked her to school, and every afternoon I met her at the gate. On Fridays, she came home with a folder full of drawings, and we taped the best ones to the refrigerator until the refrigerator itself disappeared beneath layers of color. Margaret visited every Saturday. She and Maya would sit at the kitchen table with the colored pencils and draw together. Margaret was terrible at drawing, which made Maya laugh so hard she sometimes slid right off her chair. Maya called her she. Margaret called Maya my artist. Sometimes I would hear the two of them whispering together while I stood in the kitchen doorway holding a cup of coffee, simply breathing in the moment. I started therapy in May. Priya recommended a therapist named Dr. Kessler, who specialized in family of origin trauma. I didn't go because I felt broken. I went because I wanted to understand why I had spent 29 years saying, "Okay, Mom." The answer didn't arrive all at once. It came slowly, the way spring arrives in Seattle. Gray for a long time. Then suddenly, everything blooms. Hazel and Henry began making their restitution payments on time. Once a month, I checked the trust account, confirmed the deposit, and then closed the screen. Eventually, they sold their house and moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of Seattle. Lauren told me that. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel pity. I just felt okay. Derek sent a text in August. 3 short lines. "I'm sorry. I should have known. I should have done more." I read it. I didn't reply. Maybe someday I will. Maybe I won't. That choice belongs to me now. One evening in October, Maya was drawing at the kitchen table while I graded papers beside her. She suddenly set down her pencil and looked up. "Mom," she asked, "why didn't we always live here?" I put my pen down, and I thought about it, really thought about it, the way you do when a child asks a question that deserves more than a quick answer. "Because sometimes it takes a while to find your way home," I told her softly. "But we're here now. And we're staying." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to drawing. I leaned over to see what she was sketching. It was the house again. Our house. But this time, there were 3 figures standing in front of it. A tall one, a small one, and behind them, a shorter one with white hair and a wide smile. I stared at that drawing for a long moment. Then I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't weigh anything at all. If there is one thing I hope you take from my story, it is this. Sometimes the hardest truth to accept is that the people who should protect you can also be the ones who hurt you the most. For years, I believed that keeping the peace meant being a good daughter. I stayed quiet, said, "Okay," and convinced myself that enduring unfairness was the price of family. But silence doesn't heal betrayal. It only hides it. What finally changed my life was realizing that protecting my child mattered more than protecting someone else's lies. Standing up for myself wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about truth, responsibility, and the kind of example I wanted to set for my daughter. Children learn what love looks like by watching us. I wanted Lily to grow up knowing that respect, honesty, and safety are not privileges. They are rights. This story isn't just about losing a family and finding a house. It's about finding the courage to stop accepting what is wrong simply because it's familiar. Sometimes choosing yourself feels terrifying, especially when it means breaking old patterns. But the moment you choose dignity over silence, everything begins to change. And sometimes that choice is exactly what leads you home. If this story moved you in any way, please take a moment to support the channel. Your like helps this story reach more people who might need to hear it. And if you believe that truth, courage, and protecting the people we love matter, please consider subscribing so you won't miss the next story. I'd also really love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me what you think. If you had been in my place that night at the anniversary party, would you have stayed silent? Or would you have done the same thing? Reading your thoughts and experiences reminds me that none of us are truly alone in moments like these. And if you feel this story could resonate with someone else, please share it with them. Sometimes, a single story can give someone the strength to stand up, speak the truth, and choose a better future. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this journey.